Welcome to Impact Pasadena. It's my honor to have today as my guest Assemblymember Chris Holden from the 41st District of California. I've admired Chris's career for so long. He served for 24 years on the Pasadena City Council. He was, I believe, the youngest city council person elected to that office at the age of 28.
To my knowledge.
Yeah, and he was then elected to the Assembly in 2012. Mm-hmm. So now you're going on 6 years.
Yep.
Don't know whether to congratulate or offer my condolences, one or the other. He's had a really distinguished career already on in the Assembly. He's the chair of the Utilities and Energy Committee, very important for the state. Mm-hmm. Has been active in areas like education and transportation, and we're going to talk about all those issues today. But before we do, I wanted to just ask you and talk a little bit about how you got here. I know you came from a political family. Your dad was a state senator, and what other positions did your dad hold?
LA City Council member.
Yeah.
And certainly after, and he served with a chief deputy for Kenny Hahn for many years, mm-hmm. When Kenny was on the board of supervisors. But yeah, no, it was having someone around you that understood the politics you hear on occasion. My brother and I, we would be taken out to various events that he would go to.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, my association with politics was going to neighborhood events, and my brother and I sitting there bored to tears,
yeah.
and he was making his way around. So I said, who wants to do this?
Exactly.
But it wasn't until after I graduated college and I was working with the probation department at Juvenile Hall.
Uh-huh.
And so I had a night job there, and I saw these young people who were under 18, many minor crimes, some major crimes, including murder, and it made me think, what can I do? What kind of role can I play? And
yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in a political family also, and I think that although it's sometimes difficult, you have to make sacrifices when mm-hmm. you grow up in the public eye and public life. But I also think you get injected a little bit with the bug of public service, which evidently happened to you.
It did.
You couldn't avoid it.
But it just kind of happened. When I decided to run for city council, the first office, I didn't sit down with Dad and talk about it. Yeah. I just decided, this is what I wanted to do, and then I shared with him later, and I think he thought that I was kidding. I don't think he thought that I would ever find myself in that place, but it was my decision. I realized that I had a desire to serve, and it came naturally, so I didn't feel pressured into doing it.
Yeah.
It was
Well, I know you had to make some sacrifices. I know that you're a gifted athlete, and you had to make a choice between pursuing a career in sports. And
I did.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I actually here in Pasadena, I attended Pasadena High School. Mm-hmm. We had great teams coached by George Turgeon at the time, and we won 2 CIF championships, 2 state championships, and we were rated in the top 5 nationally of high school teams around the country. And my junior year, we had a chance to represent the United States in the World High School Games, and we played Spain and Barcelona in the finals.
Wow.
We lost. But I will say, I've yet to see high school students look like they did. Bald heads, beards, that kind of look. So
yeah.
I suspect that they were ringers, but we put up a good fight, okay. And I ended up at San Diego State. I have 4 years there. Tony Gwynn was one of our notables, was our point guard, also distinguished Hall of Famer in baseball. I graduated. I decided that I was going to run for city council. I was 23 at the time. I got a call from a friend of mine who was in New Zealand. They needed you could have 2 Americans play on an international mm-hmm. team. And so he reached out to me, and I said, well, I've made a decision to run for this office. Mm-hmm. And so I had to let that go. The long pause on the phone would suggest that he didn't quite understand how I was passing up 6 months or 9 months in New Zealand to play basketball to run for office at 23. But as it turned out, it served me well.
Well, that's the bug we talk about, that, when it's between your love of sports and your desire to do public service.
Yeah, and I think, Hoyt, it was one of those situations too that it's also about commitment. Yeah. I try to, when I make a decision, I try to stick with it. It's not always easy, but I found that when I let people know that this was what I was going to do, I want to be that 23-year-old flaky guy that says, well, I've decided not to run, and I'm going to go do this over here. So I think it worked out.
So, it may surprise people to know that city council people at Pasadena don't make a lot of money. It's a stipend, I believe. So you went in and you had your own small business that you operated for a number of years while you were on the city council.
I did. I did not win that first race, but 4 years later, I ran and won in 1989. And in the interim, I started practicing real estate. I worked for a company called DOM Commercial Industrial in Los Angeles. So I did mostly industrial sales and leasing.
Sure.
And I cut my teeth there. And then when I was elected to the council, then became a little bit of an impact. I think a lot of times people don't realize even though it's a part-time council, the kinds of responsibilities to prepare for it and then to serve in the community and be responsive to community concerns and issues in a very diverse city. I mean, you realize that a lot of the same issues that a big city like Los Angeles is dealing with, in a smaller mid-sized city, Pasadena finds itself dealing with the same kind of issues, and the pressure on your time. So it was always a challenge trying to maintain a good income and at the same take care of family and at the same time serve community.
Yeah, this is the sacrifice of public service that people don't often understand.
Yeah, it's true.
So you ran for the Assembly in 2012. What were your goals when you ran for Assembly? What were you thinking about that you'd like to do? Because you're expanding now from a mid-sized city to a state, one of the largest states in the Union and one of the biggest economies in the world.
Right.
So what's that about?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of what I was doing at the time before my election was in the area of transportation. I had served nearly 20 years on the Burbank Airport Authority, and so with an airport and transportation that represented, and all the different multimodal projects that we worked around there, from the Metrolink and the like, that connected to the airport, to working from the city council chambers on light rail and the Gold Line. And at that time I was mayor when I worked with Adam Schiff to help establish his bill that established the Gold Line Rail Authority. And so going into the Assembly, I had all that sort of as a background to work from, and the Gold Line was immensely popular at that time, and seeing it extend to the eastern part of the valley was very important. And so we ran on that. We ran on the platform of jobs and economic development and on education. So those were the three pillars, and once I was elected, those are the things that I initially focused on.
So you get to the state assembly, and it's a majority Democrat assembly, not a super majority at this point, but a majority.
Right.
What is the difference between working in a large legislative assembly from the other experiences that you've had in a small city council and working with a governor and all the different departments?
It is, clearly you're trying to build a consensus around your position, for sure. And so one of the things that became very apparent was that here in Pasadena, or local government, you rely to a great degree on your city manager and your city manager form of government. And so the staffs kind of work in collaboration and bring the proposals to the council. Here, in the Sacramento, you're sort of working through committees, and the committees kind of give leadership and direction, and they're run by the members, chaired by a member. The staff plays a consultant role, and so it really is sort of the reverse in some respects. Then you have the advocacy groups that come in and advocate for or against, and so you find yourself really advocating for initiatives and moving it through a committee process, and then ultimately you get it through both houses and it gets to the governor's desk, and then you have your chief executive who gets to say yes or yay or nay to months and sometimes years of hard work, and doesn't always go your way, but more times than not it has.
So I may just have a way outsider view of this, but the Congress of the United States has a very, very low rating in public opinion. My impression is that the California legislature is better regarded to some degree, and I think it's because you seem to have more accomplishments on the state level and at local level here in California too than you would see nationally. Is that a function of the Assembly working well? Is it a function of the majority there? Is it a function of our governor at the time? And what are the components of that?
Hoyt, I'd say it's a little bit of all of the above. I think that we have a fairly effective bipartisan working relationship on both sides of the aisle, and I think that clearly, because it's a Democratic legislature, a lot of the bills, a lot of the initiatives are sort of put forward by the Democratic members. But I think the governor has played a very important role in terms of sort of being a steady hand, being very pragmatic, and making sure that we were not only reinvesting, because when I got to Sacramento, it was on the tail end of one of the worst economic crises in many, many years. And so we were dealing with deficits that we were coming out of, very important programs that needed to be reinvested into, like education. And the governor also made it very clear, and we agreed with it, that there needed to be a rainy day fund just in case we found ourselves in that situation again. So there was a firewall. And so he was very pragmatic in terms of how he structured the finances of the state. I think that we were investing, maybe not as much as many of us would like in certain areas that had been deferred, but at the end of the day, it has sent a message, I think, out of fiscal responsibility to many in the state who see that as very important. And even though we may have been losing some businesses that were finding it more favorable to be in other states, it was primarily because we value environmental initiatives that we are trying to achieve, and that there's a new market economy that finds California incredibly desirable. And so some of our many long-term businesses that have been here, whether it's in the aerospace industry or the motion picture industry, we've used tax credits to try to generate and stimulate those businesses to do their business in California, and the trickle down has been good even for smaller businesses. So I think those type of things resonate well with voters.
This is probably a good time to bring up the issue of the federal government and the Trump administration, because you contrast a fairly effective state government in California and other states too, and local governments, with what appears to be an fairly obstructionist and backward-looking federal administration. And I know California is on the front line of that in terms of the fight. Where do you see that going? Is it going to change when we have a new governor? Are we winning or losing our battle for some of the things that are important to Californians?
We are. I don't think we're. Well, it's under threat. Okay. The issues, whether it's healthcare, immigration, those are issues that are out there that, until there's a national solution, then you're finding states kind of piecemealing, addressing the issues. So until there's comprehensive immigration reform, states are going to have to try to continue to figure out how to manage the issues on their own. And so to the extent that we're doing it in a way that's trying to be sensitive and respectful, it is being attacked and really taking more militaristic, heavy-handed approach on addressing the issues of people who are seeking, for one reason or another, sanctuary in a in the United States. And California is trying to be respectful of what those issues represent.
Yeah.
But we can't do it by ourselves. We have to have the involvement of the national government. And I think that this administration and Congress has basically allowed the White House to sort of push sort of strong agendas forward, especially some of it targeting California, because they recognize that whether it's environmental initiatives and then using the EPA to undermine our progress there, it feels like it's targeted to California.
It does, but I also have the sense that we've held our ground pretty well.
We've held our ground very well. I think that through our Attorney General, Javier Becerra, Eric Holder in the early years, who came on and was counsel to our pro tem and speaker and the governor to help navigate Washington with a legal strategy, but also a political one. I think that we've done a really good job of drawing the line in the sand, and not just, being obstructionists or anything like just for the sake of it, but really standing firm and believing speaking out for what you believe in. And I think that we've been winning court victories that I think that's the process. We've made a legal argument, they've made a legal argument, and so far ours are prevailing in the courts.
It's a pretty good model, I'd say, for political resistance in a sense, and sticking up for what we believe in. So talking about what we believe in, let me look at some of the areas that I know you've been so active in. I wanted to raise the issue of education as one. I know you've really been a leader in things like the Pathways program, affordability for students. But let me ask you in a general question, what do you see as the major challenges for the educational system in California as a whole, and also in our district?
Well, I think it's really creating policies that help fill the achievement gap, which exists, and a lot of our kids are falling into that cavern that's existing where they're either not being met where they are in terms of their needs. Early education is, I think, foundational to addressing many of the concerns and what we're challenged by. And I know the new governor has really is focusing on early education and seeing monies invested. So to a large extent, I think with the move, with having a new governor, and I don't want to predict an outcome, but if it's who I think it's going to be, I do believe there's going to be a great deal of investment in early education, which I think does a lot to sort of turn that tide, because so many young people, especially minority youngsters who are starting school and may not have the right foundation, if they're not reading and writing by first grade, or certainly kindergarten, first grade, and then being able to test well at third grade, then that's where they're getting put on a path, and they're either going to be put on a college path, or they're going to put on another path that may not be investing in them in the way that they need, that the system needs to.
Full disclosure, I'm a member of the Board of Trustees at Pasadena City College.
Yes.
And one of the things that we've been so grateful to you for is the aligning, in a way, the pathway for high school students into college, junior college, by taking classes, college classes actually, in the high schools. Also addressing the affordability issues that many of our students have. So thank you for that. I wonder whether, what are some of the other issues that you see around that pathway between high school and college, and also into the workforce as well?
Well, as you know, Hoyt, we recognize that every young person graduating high school is not necessarily positioned or wants to go to college.
Or needs to.
And so I think that the dual pathways, the dual enrollment, creates an opportunity for college or career. So there's an opportunity while in high school to, if applied appropriate or applied to its maximum opportunity, there's a chance that young people can finish high school with their high school diploma and their AA degree. One of the things that makes it affordable too for those who do seek to go to college is that it limits the amount of time that they're in college. So as a parent who had 5 kids going to college at various times, usually close together. You're concerned about the economics of making that work. And so having a young person be able to enter college and then they're focusing on their major subjects, so you're 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, as opposed to 4 or 4.5, that's a major advantage. But then there's the other young person who recognizes that they'd like to start after high school a career and to have the appropriate training. We've looked at having labor organizations and the trades be a part of this program in a way that they could maybe be apprenticed afterwards and be put in a process where they can really make a good living. And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to encourage through this, and I appreciate your leadership in that regard, because it's a tool to help, and I view those in education, yourself and those at the high school level and the K through 12 as on the front line. And so the more tools we can make available to recognize that we can prepare a lot of our young people right away for a workforce that's out there, if they're trained and properly positioned, can step right into, and those who are going on to college to be able to excel there.
I know that a lot of our college students who are first generation college, never been, family had not been to college before, they're working class. Affordability is a huge issue. A lot of them are working 30 hours a week at Starbucks. They're contributing to the family. But one thing that you've proposed, I know, is the Metro Pass, which is transportation is a huge issue for students. They can't afford a car half the time. They need to take the Metro, but the Metro has been going back and forth about giving them a break on the passes. And I know you've done some work in that area. Where are we with student passes now?
Well, I can tell you, Hoyt, it's not as far as I'd like to be. It's one of those moments and one of those projects, among others, that you recognize it's a good idea, not because I woke up and said, hey, this is a great idea, but people have said, can you do this? This would really benefit young people who are in high school and college to be able to have less financial burden and to be able to also aid the environment as well. By having a public transportation and getting out of their cars. We have had a great deal of resistance over the last couple of years because of the economics of this, trying to put together a program that can be universally utilized by transit districts around the state. Some transit districts like LA and certainly Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley and some Northern California cities really and counties really lock on and see the value, and many are already doing it in some way or another. It's just not going as far as it could. But others don't.
We don't get it with Metro, for example, because you've got 5 cars on the train, and you're not adding new equipment. It's not costing anymore. You're creating new riders by having people come in as young people. So I understand that it's more complicated than that, but from the ground level, it looks pretty.
It's simple, and here's the thing. So we've got the finance committee was able to move forward at least a pilot program that allows us to, look at San Francisco and Los Angeles County to start to test to see what ridership would look like. We were initially trying to get $50 million for a period of time. $100 million over 10 years, I think, is what we were looking for. To subsidize it and make it free for low-income high school and college students. So that's the ultimate goal.
Even a 50% break of some kind, every little bit helps, because these students, one of the things just coincidentally is the textbook issue, because a lot of them are paying for hardcover textbooks that the publishers change 3 sentences every year, and some of the students are paying $400 a year for a semester for textbooks, and we're trying to move them to online educational resources so they'll be able to do that, but there's always resistance to all these things.
It is. It's frustrating, isn't it?
It can be.
Yeah.
On the workforce issue, let me just jump out a question, because I'm curious, is how's the California economy looking? I know we're in a supposedly good economic environment, and a lot of the indicators are good, unemployment, the stock market, things like that. But then there still is wealth disparity, income disparity that we see. So sometimes those numbers are deceptive. But overall, how are we looking?
Well, I think we are looking good. I think that the real challenge for us is then to continue to not rest on that, but to continue to put in place policies that will allow us to build for the kind of future we want. And so we recognize through the reports that we'll be like 1 million degrees short by 2025 of having young people in the math and science, math, and technology skill area. And so we're trying to figure out how to position these young people now so that these jobs that will be there, they will be prepared to step in and actually do them. So the Silicon Valley, many of the companies are doing incredibly well, new companies being birthed every day in the technology field. And so for us, we see in California, this has become a place for these kind of companies to grow and develop. And so they're creating opportunities, and we don't want to be in a situation where the workforce is coming from outside of California. We want our young people to be able to step into those roles and opportunities and be positioned to succeed.
Yeah, and you know, you don't have to be a Caltech graduate to work in high tech. There's a lot of mid-skill level jobs in my field in entertainment. For example, digital animation is something that you can learn with a 2-year certificate. You don't have to go to CalArts and spend a lot of money or wherever. So I know I agree with you. Identifying those mid-skill jobs is so important. What about though the real disparity that you see from essentially working class unskilled jobs and the multi-million-dollar CEOs, which seems to be the gap has just widened incredibly.
It is. It's very disheartening because I think what we're really looking at, much like we did back in the 60s, is the issue of poverty and wealth disparity and how to bridge that gap. Part of the challenge is California is just becoming a very unaffordable place to live, and even if you have a job, even if you have a good job, just here in Pasadena, I mean, homes are where you could kind of get a starter home back in the day for $200,000, and your job would allow you to afford a mortgage and take care of your family. That was middle income. Now, if you can't afford the mortgage on $1 million home or more, then this is probably not the community that you can. And I'm talking about bungalows, not just.
I know you are. I know you
so
are.
It is a challenge on that front, but it is not just our community, but throughout the state. And so affordable housing is sort of a fundamental piece to this. We see a growing homeless community, many of them falling into various categories of just having other challenges that need to be addressed and are not. But then there are other people who are just like a paycheck removed. And
well, that's right. And this income disparity, it affects not just some of the issues like we've talked about, but also, as you said, housing, transportation, health care, all of these things. So the numbers are rosy and we're glad for them, but at the same time, there's some systemic issues that need to be addressed. And I know you can't accomplish it all on the state level, but I know there's a lot you can do.
There's a lot we can do, and I think that just given the fact that we passed bills here recently to try to make college affordable by making it free at the community college level, so there's efforts underway in that.
I think it's actually great work, and I look forward to talking to you some more in the next segment. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Boy, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's terrific to have you.